People here to begin. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. I am Kashima Pearson, Assistant Director of Alumni Communities and Volunteer Engagement within the Alumni Relations Office at the University of Chicago, and very excited to welcome you all to Networking 2.0, Cultivating Your Professional Ecosystem. So this event is the last virtual event of our Networking in the New Year series. So we are very excited again to have you all a part of this networking journey with us. So today's speaker is career coach Caroline Ouwerkerk, who is also an alumna of the University of Chicago. And we are very happy to have her here to talk about how you can make networking less awkward and hopefully more results oriented. A few house rules. So during today's webinar, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to them during the Q&A portion of today's session. And then following the webinar, a survey will pop up. So please share your thoughts about your experience. And then lastly, a recording will be sent to everyone along with some resources by tomorrow or Monday, the latest. So please keep a lookout for that email. Okay, so with that said, please welcome Caroline.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Kashima, for that introduction. My name is Caroline Ouwerkerk. I am so excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite topics, networking. This is something I could talk about for hours, this and LinkedIn, mostly because it's the thing that everyone loves to hate, and I think it's just a lot of fun. So we're going to dive right into it, but feel free to keep dropping your introductions in the chat and introducing yourself. So let's dive into it as well. So welcome. All right, we already said that. So there is a workbook that is associated with this, but I am a recovering teacher. So I will give you the workbook at the end of the session so that it doesn't distract you in the meantime. We're also going to send information about how to get that later. But if you happen to be catching the recording of this, you'll be able to find it up on my website as well. All right, so with that, I want to share the goal I have for this webinar, which is I want to cast a vision of networking that is different. Okay, so networking that's meaningful instead of transactional, networking that's energizing instead of depleting, networking that's productive instead of frantic, and especially networking that's easy instead of time consuming. Okay, this doesn't have to take forever. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be easy, right? So I want us to go from, I want us to go from networking to network weaving, okay? So we're trying to consider how we can take a broader view of how we're building communities and how we're weaving the ecosystem that we're building, as opposed to thinking about it as transactional. All right, I'm so excited to dig into this. All right, let's see. So my challenge for you today, as we dig into the content of our workshop, is I want you to listen to, or I want to offer what I have to share with you today, and I want to challenge you to think about one action that you can take, building off of what we're talking about in this workshop, within the next 24 hours. So what's one thing? It can be very simple. It could be 10 minutes. But what is one thing that you can do within the next 24 hours? Because that's really how we get the momentum going. If you walk away from this workshop and you're like, I will get started on that when I have time, let me know when you find the time, because it is really hard to do that in our busy world. But you can do one quick thing within the next 24 hours. For bonus points, you can identify one person to reach out to within the next 3 days. That can be super fun too. All right, so with that, if you have a piece of paper, I would write this down, right? What's the one action you can commit to? I am really excited to be back here. This is actually the 6th workshop that I have facilitated for the University of Chicago Alumni Office. I'm always thrilled when I get the chance to be here. Here are a couple of other workshop titles that I have also facilitated, including for general job seekers, the Standing Out from the Crowd workshop and the You Are Here Making Any Job a Social Impact Job. Even if you're not in the social impact space, both of those offer some really great broad tips if you're navigating a career search right now. I'm a proud University of Chicago alumna. This is a picture of me looking like an infant on my first day of school under Cobb Gate on the quad. And I am married to a U Chicago alum, and my brother and my sister-in-law are also U Chicago alumni. So this is all four of us on our wedding, or on my husband and my wedding day. And proud U Chicago family. I wanted to share a little bit about so after I graduated from the University of Chicago and graduated from grad school, I actually came back to the University of Chicago, where I ran a research program on urban research broadly defined. And I used to talk about that as being a professional networker. Okay, so that I had always kind of been a connector, but my first sort of professional job was really gave me the opportunity to be this kind of facilitator, connector of dots, at the ripe age of 23. And I've really been building on that work ever since. And so that's part of the reason why I'm here, which is, I love networking. I love connecting people who have the same questions or same ideas from different perspectives, right? So I did that at the University of Chicago. I did that at some other universities as well. And now I am a full-time coach. So I work with clients around the world and connect people with each other through career coaching, through leadership coaching for mission-driven leaders, and through workshops like this one that I do for the public or for companies and nonprofits as well. But one of my favorite things is something I call a happy Ouwerkerk, right? And that is a facilitated networking event, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But it started as a way to help people pronounce my last name, Ouwerkerk. But it has evolved into a really fun monthly-ish kind of experience where we try to make networking less awkward by really supporting you through the process. Okay, so the next event is coming up February 18th, but and it's free and open to the public. You'll find a link to this in the follow-up materials, but just want to kind of offer that as this kind of snapshot of some of the things that I do. Okay, one of the things that is really important about the Happy Ouwerkerk is that our number one rule is to make friends first. Okay, and I want to offer that as kind of a jumping off point for how we're approaching networking in this conversation. The second rule is take action. So those are really the two most important elements of networking, regardless of what venue you're doing that in. And so I want to offer that here as well. Okay, so let's start with why networking feels awful. All right, so I want to bring Oprah into this, right? Because I think of this image every time I think about networking, right? Where it's like our predominant paradigm of networking is exactly this. Like, you get a business card, you get a business card. How many business cards can I pass out? Okay. If you find this funny, I can't see your faces, so I can't see your sympathy laughs, but I would appreciate, you're welcome to drop any of that energy into the chat as well, because I found this funny. So I'd love to hear what you think as well. Thank you. All right, we got it. Okay, fabulous. So with that, we want to talk about, I wanted to mention that this is networking 2.0. So there is a networking 1.0. That's the Make Networking Less Awkward webinar. If you haven't seen that, this is kind of the top level overview of that, right? So that was a webinar I did for the University of Chicago a couple of years ago. It talks about focusing on real conversations with real people. I offer 10 strategies for highly effective networking and how to make it effective, right? How to make it work, right? I offer some goals about networking, and I also offer a framework for how to structure a networking session or informational interview. Okay, so in this session, we're going to be taking this basic background knowledge and taking it to the next level. Kashima sent me some of the comments that you all made on your registration forms, so I've tried to incorporate some of the specific requests that you had into this session. So with all that background, let's dive into what we're talking about today, which is networking, right? So as I mentioned, we're going from networking to network weaving, okay? Another version of this is thinking about something called the transition from extractive networking to regenerative networking. So I'm a social impact career and leadership coach. So most of my clients are working in mission-driven work, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, corporate, nonprofits, work that is contributing to some of to like a broader social mission-driven, purpose-led work. And one of the really one of the growing topics in this space is something called regenerative agriculture, right? So it's a move from agriculture that's extractive to an agricultural practices that are replenishing the soil and thinking about an ecosystem mentality to improve the long-term sustainability of the planet. I want to offer a similar approach for rethinking networking, right? So moving from extractive networking, where it's really, how do I get something out of this conversation and it feels like a chess game, to regenerative networking, how do we build more of an ecosystem? Okay, so what I mean by that is that we're shifting from, we're shifting from transactional to a model that supports community growth and considers both individuals and the whole community wisdom. Okay, we're thinking about an interconnected ecosystem, right, where everything you do has a ripple effect. Okay, the relationships that you nurture end up connecting with other people, and you're contributing to this larger community space. We're moving from posturing, feeling like you need to show up. I need to have my elevator pitch. I need to really impress the socks off of this person, to much more authentic, real conversations with real people, right? We're moving from calculated to abundant, right? There's more than enough out there for all of us, right? It's adaptable, it's wild, understanding what's working instead of forcing it, right? You're also nurturing relationships that can self-pollinate without your intervention. I do, Kashima, it looks like if you can see the slides, can we get one or two like thumbs up in the chat? It seems like some folks are having some problems. Awesome. Okay. All right. Okay. Sounds good. So we're moving from abundant to adaptable, and then short term, right? To, I need to network to find a job right now, to perennial, right? How do we nurture these relationships for the long haul? Okay. Another way of thinking about this is thinking of every person in your network as thinking of your network as a garden, okay? And every person in your network is a plant in that garden, all right? And as we know, if anyone's done any networking, I saw someone comment that they love talking about wildflowers, right? Every plant has a different purpose, and they contribute something different to the garden, right? We might have flowers that really add a lot of beauty and energy to the space. We might have fruits that end up having lots of wisdom in them, and offering seeds that really nurture future plants, right? We might have ground cover in your garden that takes up a lot of space and doesn't contribute much, right? We can have weeds in your garden that are really negative and clog up other things, right? Those are really can be really distracting. And then there can be like labor intensive plants that take a lot of energy and really don't contribute much. And volunteer plants, right? So volunteering in gardening is when a plant just self-seeds and really takes off and you didn't really do much, okay? So here's the thing. If we don't take time to tend to our garden, we'll have nothing to harvest, okay? And so tending to the garden now means that we can enjoy the benefits of the plants themselves, not just the fruits. So how do we plant the garden and take networking from extractive to regenerative? Okay. There you go. Ground cover plants hold the soil down and less erosion. So yes, exactly, right? So they are all part of that network of keeping the structure together. I love it. So so how do we do this, right? So I'm going to offer a couple of different things to consider, right? And then and dig into a little bit of these as we keep going. Okay. So number one, these are the 6 S's of this networking idea. So number one is, before we get into all of this, which is mindset, which is, if you think that it's going to be miserable, it will be. Okay, that's the number one secret of networking, which is if you think it's going to be miserable, it will be, right? So part of this is a mindset shift around um, uh, being excited about what these relationships can offer to you and um, uh, how you might benefit from this experience as opposed to um, as opposed to really viewing this as a negative task. Okay. And that's where I come back to this rule or this mindset of making friends first. How can you have a real conversation with a real person? So with that, number one, the sort of first element of this is specificity. Okay. So when we can get clear on what our goals are for networking, it can really set the tone of the rest of this experience, right? So there are usually kind of two approaches or two reasons why someone might want to network at any given time. Especially if you're on the job hunt, right? So one is to get information about something, right? I want to learn about this industry. I want to learn about the jobs that are in this space. I want to understand what this company is like. I want to figure out, what this culture of this industry is like. That can be really helpful. The number one way to make that helpful is to understand what the right answer is for you. Okay. So to use this time instead of to ask information or ask questions that you can Google, to use this time to confirm hunches that you might have about a given space, right? So you can understand what the right answer is for you, not in general, right? So when you ask a question like, it becomes a lot more, you can get a lot more helpful information if you ask a question like this from the perspective of, I feel like this job might really involve a lot of after hours work. Is that a fair assessment? Or what's been surprising about the work that you've been doing here? And kind of understand what is the hunch that you're trying to confirm or disprove. Okay. I also want another reason why someone might be trying to network is to enable someone to help you get noticed, right? So you are trying to make a connection at an organization so that when there is a job available, you're able to reach out to that person and say, hey, I've applied for this job. Or if it's at a Fortune 500 company, you're getting an internal referral, right? That's that's very important depending on what kind of organization you're applying for. And there can be benefits for them as well, right? But the time to do that is before you are sending an application out the door, because in this job market, right, the time is of the essence. And so sending out it can be really helpful if you're applying for a role at a major company to get an internal referral, but you need to get that internal referral link prior to submitting your application. It's a special link and you'll need that before you actually submit. And in some cases, it can fast track you to get an interview. But you want to be doing that before that job is posted, right? Because by the time the job is posted, you're kind of behind the 8 ball, right? So how do we do this? Well, we start by making sure that we're thinking about the kinds of organizations that we're excited about so that we can proactively start that networking process. I just want to offer a couple of phrases that really drive me bananas when it comes to networking, and sort of how we broach these conversations, right? I listed them here, right? But can I pick your brain? Is a really, as we'll keep talking about, right? We're trying to take this value-based networking of mutual benefit, right? And so can I pick your brain just ends up really leaning more on that extractive end of things, right? The second two questions here around what's the culture like and how hard is it are not as helpful for you because they don't get to what's the right answer, right? And instead, if we frame this as, I'm anticipating that this culture is really competitive, or it sounds like it's very, everybody here really works, collaborates and really works together to get projects across the finish line. Is that a fair assessment, right? Understanding sort of what is it that you actually mean. And then that last one, we're going to get into that a little bit more. If you hear of anything, let me know. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit later about how one of the secrets to networking is really to do the work for the other person so that you make it easier for them to say yes to you. Okay. And if you hear of anything that's just too broad to make it easy to help you. Okay. All right. If any of this is resonating with you, feel free to let us know in the chat so that I can keep um, adding to this. And then we are going to have space at the end of the session for additional questions as well. All right. So mostly specificity, right? So yes, the recording is going to be available to everyone after the call. There is no substitute for doing the clarity work, right? So understanding what you're trying to get out of a given experience is crucial. Okay. There's lots of different ways to do this. There's lots of resources, like the Alumni Career Network channel on YouTube has amazing resources about getting clarity on your job search. Career coaches can help. A notebook where you're just journaling and thinking about what you actually want out of the next phase of your career is absolutely essential. Super helpful, because once you know what you want, then you can help other people help you get what you want. The second S is serendipity. You never know who you know knows. Okay. What I mean by that is if you only focus on what you expect to get out of a given conversation, right, you're going to miss beautiful opportunities elsewhere. All right. And that, I think, is one of the most beautiful things about networking. I always think of a time when I met a mentor of mine. And the way that I met this mentor was because I met her husband. Her husband worked in education. Actually, like her husband worked in education, had nothing to do with the work that I was doing. But we happened to run into each other at an executive education event. I was talking to him the last day of the session. We were just, chatting. And he said, I was talking about one of the things that I could talk about for hours. At that time, it was blog posts. Rest in peace, Google Reader. Okay. So I was talking about my love of blog posts and reading all these blogs and everything. And he said, I love what you're talking about. I think my wife would really enjoy getting the chance to meet you. And so I was like, sure, that sounds great. I'd love, he's like, she just wrote a book and it needs to write a blog post. Maybe she can chat with you. And so I ended up accepting that introduction and getting the chance to meet his wife, who was who had a lot of really great expertise and experience, and ended up becoming a really great mentor of mine for about a decade there. Right. So it really offered, but it was just a chance meeting, because I wasn't, it was serendipity and preparation. Right. So really getting the chance to kind of build off of that and let that momentum go, where you don't, and instead of moving away from this kind of calculated idea, right? You don't know what's going to grow. And being open to chance. It's about, who knows what will grow. All right. Yes. Okay. So fabulous. Okay. So where do we find the seeds, right, of connection? So there's a couple of different places. So we're now getting into the tactics here, right? So personal introductions is one of the most common ways that people find people to talk to, right? So one thing I'd like to offer here is a concept called a double opt-in connection. Okay, what we mean by that is that we're not just randomly giving out people's contact information and just randomly offering to connect people, right? But instead, we're asking both people if they want to be connected, and then making the introduction, right? So you're not just dumping someone and then dashing. I have a fantastic article about this concept written by someone named Kat Bellows, who's an expert on adult friendships. I linked to this article in the workbook that I'm going to send out, but it's really about letting people consent to participation, right? No connection without consent. So that's one thing. And that's really just because you never know what the other there's so many different reasons why someone might say it's not a good time for me to connect with someone right now. So I want to do that. And then this other idea is the 2 email strategy. Okay. So if someone is introducing you to someone specific, right, you're making it easy for them to help you by writing an email that's designed to be forwarded on your behalf. Okay. And I have a script for this in the workbook, but it's set up for success, right? You're writing an article, writing an email to your friend, right? But asking her to introduce you to someone else, right? And writing that email to her as knowing that it's going to be read by a second party or third party, right? And you're saying, this is why I want to talk to that person. Here's some information about me. If you're including a link to, or you're including a link to your LinkedIn, if you're including any documents, you're sending them as links instead of PDFs where they can get detached, right? And you're making it easy to say yes. Okay. And making it easy for your friend to just click forward and send it off to you, as opposed to needing to like craft an entire email on your behalf. In that case, it's also really helpful to offer a compelling reason to connect with you. Why should they say yes, right? And specific, why this person specifically, right? Like I've always been interested in talking, in talking to Caroline, because like I know that she's got this 10 or like I checked out her profile online, and I've been really interested in this thing that she writes there, right? So you're really trying to make sure that there's a compelling answer. It's not just like you happen to work at this organization, but you've actually done your research. So talking about events, this was something that came up a lot in the comments that people submitted in the registration form. And in real life, events, right, are tricky. They can be very nerve-wracking for people. They can feel really overwhelming. You walk into a crowded room and everybody looks like they don't want to be there, or everybody's already off in little groups and you're like, where do I even start, right? It's like walking into the lunchroom and you're just like, I don't know where to sit down, right? And so I want to officially invite you to be the cool kid in this room, okay? And what I mean by that is be the person who invites other people in. This is an amazing strategy for really maximizing that experience and uh, furthering your contribution to this ecosystem and community, okay? And so what that looks like is you're chatting with someone, right? And you see someone out of the corner of your eye, and you literally turn to them and say, hey, we were just talking about X, Y, and Z thing. Would you like to join us? That is hugely powerful. And that person will remember you, right? And you look like a leader in this whole situation because you have the courage to invite other people in, okay? It is also, incidentally, a really great way to get out of a conversation, because then you can introduce these people and walk over and grab another bite of food or something, okay? So just, you can use it in lots of different ways, all right? Make it easy to say yes. Online facilitated networking events can be a much more effective way of connecting with people because they're facilitated, right? So, for example, in the happy hour Kirks that I facilitate, what happens is that I move people into Zoom rooms and give them a prompt to talk about. And then they chat about it and then move on to the next, and they're kind of with a different group of people every time. This is a format that lots of other people have been and have adapted. So you can find examples of these events all over the place. It can be really anxiety inducing. And that's why, actually, is this my next slide? I'm going to come back to it. Okay, for introverts, right? It can be really anxiety inducing because and so that's where the facilitated networking events are a lot more helpful. And you are seeing more of these in real life. There are some organizations, I think, in Chicago that are actually doing this, or you can steal this idea, right? Part of this is that sometimes I feel much more introverted and facilitate these events for other people because then I can go to the kind of event that I want to participate in, but I don't have, and then like, it's not as awkward in the, as it can be in real life, right? But be on the lookout for some of those facilitated networking events, because that can be a really easy way to do that. I actually, even when I Zoom people out to their breakout rooms, I actually tell them what order to go in, right? I say, the person with the shortest first name goes first, right? Just so that we can reduce all of the decisions and you can focus on the question. And the question is usually something like, what's a topic you could talk about for hours, right? So we're really, we're trying to start small. How can we build your confidence on a ladder? Okay. All right, let me go back to this other thing right here, which is talking about LinkedIn. And that's, I think, really important, right? So it's really important to make sure that in this modern world, LinkedIn is a really great resource. It is free real estate on the internet. And so I really encourage you to take your time to update your profile. I talk a lot about this in another webinar that I did for the University of Chicago on standing out for from the crowd. There's a whole section in that about optimizing your LinkedIn profile. Because it's, if someone is interested if you're trying to reach out to someone, they're going to go look you up, and you want to make sure that what you have on LinkedIn is reflective of what you're actually trying to do, right? I'm also doing a webinar specifically about LinkedIn in a couple of weeks. So if you want even more of a deep dive here, this can be a really helpful way to learn more about it. But the big thing here is making sure that your about section, which is the top part of it, really has some meat to it and really talks about what you bring to the table and sort of what you want to connect with. Okay. So there's two other ways here to find people on the internet. One is by going to the alumni network of your university. This is a University of Chicago event. So I have the University of Chicago screen here. This is just by typing in the top of LinkedIn, University of Chicago. This pulls up the university page, and you can actually click on this tab here, alumni, and you'll get this whole cool set of tools, and you can type in all kinds of different keywords and find various alumni that that have that keyword on their profile. And then you can sort it by where they live. You can sort it by where they went to school. You can sort it by where they work. It's really cool. And it can really, it can give you a really great intro to kind of reach out to someone and say, hey, I saw that I found you this way. Would you be interested in having a conversation with me? I'd love to learn more about your experience. The second part here is you can also see the connections of people in your network. So this is I typed in a keyword of foundation, right? And then I clicked on the people tab, and then I clicked on all filters, and then connections of. So if there are people in your network that are super connectors, you can search their specific connections this way, or you can search by second degree connection. So those are the people that you're connected to, the people that the people who you're connected to are connected to. Yeah. All right. I have a 5-month-old, so I haven't slept through the night in many months. So thank you for your patience in the meantime. All right. Cool. Anybody want to, if you have any thoughts in the chat or other ways that you have used LinkedIn, you're welcome to drop that here. All right. Or if you're like, okay, this is intriguing, let me know. All right. So how do we plant the seeds? Okay. So the number one thing is to be interesting and be interested. Okay. So we want to be interested in other people and what they have to say, right? So, this is where we really have to move away from the transactional, like, I just need to impress you, and then you're going to say kind words on my behalf. Like, that's just not how it works. It is a long game. And the other side is being interesting, right? So much of networking feels like you are a supplicant and you're going to the Wizard of Oz to ask, for good grace or whatever, and you're trying to impress this person. But you are a real human who has real things to bring to the table. Okay. And I really want you to, honor that. Okay. You have lots to contribute as well, and it can be a real conversation between equals. It doesn't have to be you feeling like you need to impress someone. Networking projects can be a really effective way to do this. What I mean by that is creating some sort of project where you're trying to interview people about a particular topic, and it can be a really great way to have an excuse to reach out to people. I have a link to a great example of this in the workbook, so I'm going to send that as well. Again, don't ask questions you can Google, and be strategic with your ask. So I want to encourage you to be thoughtful about it doesn't always have to be coffee, right? Maybe it's someone in your network that you're reaching out to and asking them to introduce you to someone else, right? Instead of like doing the whole rigmarole of a coffee and all that stuff. There's a really great book about this called The 20-Minute Networking Meeting, and I offer a summary of it in the Make Networking Less Awkward chat. But it's really about how do you optimize your time so that you can really focus on creating a warm connection, making sure that that person remembers you, and that they can remember your story when you need to harvest that, or like to call in that conversation. Yeah. Okay. So I did see a couple of comments here. So LinkedIn Premium, I have LinkedIn Premium because I had a client who worked at LinkedIn and they gave it to me for free. I have not really seen significant difference in the benefits there. It can be helpful if you are job seeking, but I think that there's a lot of other ways to use LinkedIn and without necessarily having to pay for it. The LinkedIn webinar, there's a link to register for it on my website. There is content about LinkedIn baked into that standing out from the crowd workshop. Cool. Okay, yes. And then, all right, awesome. Okay, cool. So there's that. All right. So the 20-minute and sort of just how can you be respectful of people's time? The other thing I just want to say here is to encourage you to be thoughtful when asking someone about things that they usually get paid for. Okay. So what I mean by that is if you're talking to someone and if you are interested in starting a business and you know that someone in your network is a business coach or like a entrepreneurship coach, to be thoughtful about asking them to do that work for free. Okay. Or kind of similar, right? Like everybody's got something, when you're reaching out to someone, making sure that you're honoring their expertise and not just kind of assuming that they're going to be able to do everything kind of pro bono. Okay, so introverts, we talked a little bit about this before, so I'm not going to go over this again, but I just want to, there are lots of different, what I'm trying to offer here is that there's lots of different modalities, okay? In person, online, that kind of thing. Okay, so let's talk about the kind of last part of this, which is stewardship or watering your flowers, right? So keeping in touch is a crucial part of this, right? So there's a couple of different strategies for this, right? One is just to make it easy for yourself, right? So you can write a template. You can ask ChatGPT or Claude to help you write a template that you can then reuse for various networking conversations in the future. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It can be helpful to write emails that don't require a response. Okay, so this is a way of stewarding a conversation without putting more of a burden on somebody else, right? So what that looks like is sending an email saying, I was just thinking about our conversation, this thing came to mind, and I just wanted to send it your way, hope no need to respond because I know you mentioned that this was a really busy season for you, but just wanted to let you know that you were on my mind, right? That person's actually more likely to respond than the email that you send with 17 different questions in it, right? Especially if people are kind of overwhelmed. It's always I think it's my high school principal told us on graduation day to thank your teachers, and I think about this advice constantly. Okay, and this applies to anyone who's teaching you anything. Okay, it's including in a networking conversation. Okay, so if someone helped you, make sure that you thank them, right? And that you can thank them after the conversation, but you can also thank them in the future, 6 months from now. It doesn't matter. It could be a really great way to a great excuse to reach out to someone when a connection has been kind of dormant. You can say, you just popped into my mind the other day, and I just wanted to say that I'm still thinking of our conversation from 2 years ago. Okay. It's a long tail. I had a networking conversation with someone in 2011 that I met through my work at the University of Chicago. Last summer, July 2024, I'm a historian, not a mathematician, so that's 13 years later. They found me on LinkedIn and messaged me and said, hey, would you be up for a chat? And I said, sure, because I remember, it's a long tail, right? They had seen me on LinkedIn. They had kind of been following my professional trajectory, and they wanted to reconnect. We had a great conversation, right? It's a long tail. So how do you keep track of that over time? CRM. So the CRM is a customer relationship management software. There are personal relationship management softwares. Dex is one of them. Copper is the one that I use. It's designed as a business CRM, but the sort of entry level version of it costs about $9 a month. And it sits right on top of Gmail. And so for each email address in your Gmail, can help you see all of your previous interactions with them. You can tag individual people. You can, it also pulls up their LinkedIn profile, so it can kind of help you see all this information about someone. And you can kind of set reminders where you can be reminded to, actually, you can also set like default emails, right? So it can just make this process a lot easier as you're continuing to steward this conversation. So that can be a really helpful thing. And then LinkedIn is also just a great place to track all of these things as well. I do want to mention that not everyone is a flower in your garden, and that's okay. There are some people who are not helpful for a variety of reasons, and that's okay. It may not be the season for them. It may not be, they might not have the skill set for it, and that's totally fine. It is really tempting to get fixated on feeling that someone in a given position should help you, right? Or they should be good at this, right? But the reality is that everyone's busy and everyone's overwhelmed. And the number one way that you can stand out from all these other people who are overwhelmed is by this regenerative, supportive, giving back kind of mentality, right? And that going back to that serendipity conversation of there might be other people in your network who may not positionally look like they can really help you, but actually have a lot more support to offer, or other, it can work out in a different way. Okay. So I just want to name that, because sometimes you can get stuck on like getting really stressed about a conversation with someone really important. Everyone is important. Every human here is important. And so I just want to offer that as just something to can consider. I also want to challenge you to make sure that you're doing your part here too. Okay. And what I mean by that is, how are you contributing to this conversation and to the whole ecosystem? Are there people that you can network? It's really tempting if you're a job seeker to be like, I need to focus on me. And I want to honor that too, because it's really hard. I have been there, right? But the counterintuitive element of this is that when you support and steward the whole experience for other people, it ends up benefiting you in ways that you can and cannot expect. Okay. So I just want to honor that, like, you have lots to contribute to, and that those contributions will pay dividends in the future in ways that you can and can't expect. Okay. You can always offer introductions, but just remember that double opt-in, connecting with consent kind of idea as well. This goes back to the whole web element. All right. The last part of this is seasons. So it is okay to not be like aggressively networking all the time. However, it is much easier to ramp up the networking and dial back the networking if you're kind of doing it all the time instead of in earnest when you are job hunting. Okay. Networking is going to be helpful for your professional career, even if you want to stay at your current organization for the next, until you retire. Right. So I just want to mention that there, we can have this kind of active growth mode, right? Where you're really like going on a networking flurry, right? And then we can have spaces where you're trying to be more strategic about relationships that you want to kind of call in, and favors and that kind of thing. But you need to have, it's important to have realistic expectations about this, right? It's crucial to have a relationship with people first, instead of just kind of barging in and demanding something, which is, I think, hard. It can be challenging to remember when everything feels urgent, especially in this kind of job climate. And so this is where the original idea for this workshop was really about, what should you be doing on LinkedIn when you're not actively job searching, right? And it's kind of morphed since then, obviously, but I just think it's one of those things where just a little bit of incremental work can really pay huge dividends. Okay. And then it's okay to kind of the crucial thing here is, what do you want to be known for, right? And that's where we can go back to that specificity. I call it a career thesis statement, that kind of thing. Where how might you incorporate a cadence to your networking work, so that you can make it easy for you to to do it, right? Like, can you set aside time once a month or I would say once a month or once a week, right? Where you're sending a couple of messages to people, either on email or LinkedIn. How can you incorporate this so that there's a regular cadence to the work? And you might go into winter or like slow mode, but it's never completely dead. Okay. Okay, so I want to leave time for questions. What I'm going to do right now is, as I kind of summarize what we've talked about here and then start answering some of these questions. Oh, I need to, I'm going to drop in the chat this networking workbook that I just mentioned. And as I said, it's got a couple of different, did it not go? It's got a couple of different, okay, Kashima, I'm gonna message this to you so that you can distribute it because it's not letting me do that. But I want to go into this Q&A. So actually let me so here's what we talked about, right? We talked about the difference between extractive versus regenerative networking, right? We talked about networking, this shift from networking to network weaving, right? We talked about your network as a garden and sort of how do you cultivate this kind of these kinds of relationships. Okay, yeah. So we talked about all these kinds of different elements, right? And I want to just invite. So I can open this now up to some questions to ask about what kinds of questions do. Kashima, would you like to facilitate some questions here?
Yes. So we have a question in the Q&A box from Amy. She says, do you have any suggestions for people who work in particularly isolating and antisocial fields? I am an historian, and historians really don't respond to networking in the same way.
Ooh, I'm a historian. I'm curious about that question. I'm a historian, so is my husband. But that's a great question. I think so. Okay, so I'm a strengths finder. So I use a strengths-based approach to all of this work. Okay, and I think that it's we need to think about what our natural strengths are as we think about the work that we're doing. Okay, and if your natural strength is in sharing resources with other people, in like if you find yourself being the kind of person who's like, oh, I read an article about this, or I listened to a podcast about that, or whatever, you're able to use that as a way to reach out to people, right? So you can, in a conversation, offer to connect with them or follow up with them with that resource. Okay. I also would take a step back and think about what do you need this to do for you, right? So this question of what, like, I hear you on saying, historians don't really do this. And how do you, like, what does success look like here, right? Is it people at various organizations that you can talk to, right? Is it a small group of people that you really want to, that you really want to work with, right? So I just want to, there's lots of different, thinking about the goals, I think can really help you reverse engineer that as well. Okay, fabulous. Strengths fight. No, I don't think, I don't think that, I'm asking about, okay, yeah, this is great. So the networking mindset, providing a networking mindset when you're providing a service and are looking to get connected with potential clients. I think, I think about this a lot because I do work with clients, and I really think it comes back to this authentic relationship building and authentic connection approach, and really this idea of making friends first and separating the relationship building piece from the what am I trying to get out of this piece, right? Kashima, are you seeing other comments that I can?
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone asked, sometimes when I connect with someone, I feel like I don't have anything to return in value. It's difficult to convince someone to talk to me for 30 minutes when I can't give them anything back. What would you recommend?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great question. I think that people always have something to offer, right? And this is this regenerative ecosystem conversation that we've been chatting about, right? Where it's like everybody has a role to play, right? And if we think about it as so okay, so a great example of this is for some, you have the opportunity to meet someone who's very high level at a given organization. What do you have to offer, right? This is where you can kind of take a uh, kind of questioning mindset, right? And ask about, so this is the be interested and be interesting principle, right? So how can you listen to what they want to offer, or what challenges they're running into, right? And then think about experiences or things that you've read, or people that you know, right? Um, and and try to approach it from a perspective of, oh, I've heard about this, or I'm wondering, like, I saw this article. Is this something that might be of interest to you, right? And then using that as a way to follow up with someone as well afterward. Um, yeah. So that, I mean, that is a common question, because I think people are often nervous about, what do I have to offer? But the reality is that if we shift to a perspective of, um, there's plenty to, everybody's got something to contribute, that I think it will be, I mean, I think that it gets us out of this hierarchical ranking. And I know that that sounds really basic, but the reality is that, like, it does not matter where you are. If you are, if you shift from this extractive perspective to more of that, that, having a project, or like that, actually, that's a really great example of that too. If you have a project or something like that, where you can, have an excuse to reach out to someone, that can also be something that you can share with other folks as well. Kashima, you should have that workbook as well now, if you want to be able to share it. I also, okay, can you comment on, all right,
I
so
do have
go ahead.
a good question from the Q&A box by Maria. So she says she's in a situation of an urgent job search, and she wants to know how to increase her chances if she doesn't necessarily have weeks or months.
Yeah. So, okay. So I, that is, and I just dropped the link to this workbook as well.
Okay.
So this is where I think it's so crucial to think about what you actually have within your locus of control. Okay. And so what you have within your locus of control is the way that you show up professionally in the world, right? It's where you are able to, so what I mean by that is, how might you, what action can you take without waiting for permission? Okay. So that could look like, are there ways that you can contribute to the professional dialogue, by writing about it, or by offering, by working on kind of smaller projects as you're negotiating a longer job, navigating a longer job search? Are there ways that you can explicitly ask people in your network where they need help, and how you might be able to plug into that work, right? So that can be, given the sort of um, significant changes in the hiring landscape, especially with significant layoffs in the social impact space. It can be really tricky. We need to get creative about where you have agency in this process, so that we can really lean into that, and reclaim some of that, and then that ends up helping get some of the momentum for some of these other things as well. Okay. I love this question from Eric around being nerdy and weird. I hear you. This is a University of Chicago alumni panel. Like, I get it, right? Like, we are here with dorky enthusiasm, right? And I think that if we're going to think about authenticity, we need to show up as our full selves, right? And I think that it's a lot more interesting to have a conversation with someone who is passionate. I think passion is another way that we could describe this nerdy enthusiasm, right? And it's a lot more interesting to talk to that person than the person who sounds like a robot, right? And yeah, so I want to honor that. I spent a lot of time personally being very self-conscious about my nerdiness. And then I realized that it's way more interesting to just embrace it. And you never know who's going to like feel that energy back, right? And that energy can end up just reaping rewards in ways that you just can't expect, right? Um, so I just want to offer that as well.
We have one, maybe we can take like one or two more questions. So we have a question from Tom. He asks, how should I think about the number of people in my networking group if I want to have quality over quantity?
I'm interested in hearing more about what networking group means in this particular context. I, uh, yeah. So, okay. So here's the thing. LinkedIn is a really great tool for this because I think when we go back to this idea of seasonality, right? You're not going to be in touch with all of these people all of the time, right? You're really engaging with them, and then and it's a bit of a process, right? So in terms of quality over quantity, right? I mean, I think it's a matter of instead of trying to expand all at once, how do you do this gradually so that you can go back to the people that you've had really powerful conversations with and continue to steward that over time, but also get clear on what it is that you're even looking for, what kinds of connections you're even hoping to get out of all of this as well, right? So if you're talking about like an active networking group, like like one for service providers where everyone's trying to trade referrals, I think that the best thing that you can do is take all of that time that you would be spending in that and just use it to be focusing on one-on-one conversations, that real conversations with real people. I have not really found much success with like kind of aggressive, like I went to an event once where everyone had like a stack of cards and they were just trading them around the table. And I was like, never again, right? Like, this is not what this is about. It's about understanding what value you bring to the table, and everybody brings value to the table, right? And then figuring out how you can exchange that with other folks as well.
So we have time for one more question. I'm going to give it to Emily. So she asked, what advice do you have to shake off any feelings of brain freeze that might come up in networking? Sometimes the stress of the day just makes it hard to think creatively, talk freely, etc. in a conversation. And then after it ends, I think of a million more questions or interesting comments that I could have made.
Yeah. Well, the thing here is practice, right? So it gets better. And I would also say that it can be it can be helpful to reframe like what the point is of that networking conversation in the first place. And so if you're at like a happy hour or facilitated online networking event, it can the best thing that can come out of that conversation is that you have another conversation later, right? So you have a short interaction with someone and then you're able to follow up with them later and take on more time later, right? And really continue that conversation over time. Or if you think of something that came to mind after the conversation, afterward, that you can use that as an excuse to reach out to someone and say, "Oh, this popped into my head after our call. I wanted to share this resource with you in case it was helpful."
Great advice. So that's all for the questions. Please continue to drop your LinkedIn. I see a lot of people networking in the chat, sharing their email addresses. We'll keep the chat open for, a few minutes, so for everyone to find each other. So in the meantime, I want to thank Caroline for a great session. Everyone is sharing how awesome it was. So thank you for leading us through such an enriching conversation about networking. As a reminder to everyone, when you leave the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a survey. And that will help us determine, how this session went and also future topics for conversations like these. So please be sure to complete it when you have a moment. And thanks again for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. And